Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
The show is called Leadership is Changing, and of course, there's lots of things happening around the world today. But when I say that terminology, what does that mean for you?
And this is a great question after the last one. The world needs leadership more than ever, but we don't just need leaders, we need great leaders. And by that, it's not enough anymore to be smart, competent, and capable of organizing and giving instruction to a team. A leader must be open and curious, a great listener, and someone who can show empathy and develop future leaders in this mold. And leaders now must also be committed to their ongoing personal development. They must be okay with making mistakes and owning up to it and get it wrong. Leaders are more visible than ever. And I'm thinking, especially in the movement to create more diverse, equitable, and inclusive cultures within organizations, that commitment has to come from and be modeled from the top. The days of a company's reputation coming solely from their advertising, press releases, and stock price are gone. Employees and former employees are on social media describing their workplace cultures, and there have been companies that have been outed they've been outed for saying one thing publicly and not backing it up within the organization. And the stats of senior leadership and board seats are telling, and people are paying closer attention. So there's almost this required transparency of leadership because people are going to know, how are you doing? How are you doing on these important issues?
Yeah, you're too right. And that transparency is getting louder and louder every single, not year, not week, every day. It's getting louder, right?
And then there's a new platform. A year ago, I was never talking about TikTok. Now it's all the rage.
Yeah, no, before I was talking about Kit Kat, but now we're talking about TikTok. One's a chocolate and one's not, but never mind. That's all good. But you're right. And my background is my father is from Greece, and there is a saying in the Greek side of things that a fish rots from the head. And when you're talking about leadership comes from the head of the person, of the organization, things like that, and they have to show that, and the transparency and so forth. I think it's so true. But yeah, it is getting louder and louder all the time.
And you've probably seen this as well, Dennis, when you're brought into an organization to help them develop or take on some new initiative or change. You start meeting with people and you're developing them and you're training them, and it's all great. But what you hear from the people that you're working with is, this isn't going to last long because the people at the top, they're investing the money as a look good, feel good thing, but they're not doing it.
No,
right?
You're right.
Not attending the trainings.
They're not walking the talk.
They're not walking the talk. And how many times have you heard people in workshops or training say, who really needs to be here? My boss.
All the time. Yep, you're right. You hear it all the time. And every time I will go and roll out a program, there might be 400, 500, 700, 1,000 people, whatever, go through it. That always comes up. That's number one. And then the number two bit is that we've got to start with the leaders so then they can live it all the time, for sure.
Right. And support their teams, right? If it's a new initiative, the leaders should be learning it first so that as their teams go through it, they can support them and they know what they're going through.
Too right. And when it does happen, it's a beautiful thing to see it happen, right?
Yes. When everyone's on board and it's just infiltrated throughout the company and the culture, and you see it, then everyone is okay. Our leaders, people feel good when their leaders are walking their talk. They know what to expect of them and they trust them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we've noticed is, as we're talking to leaders since the COVID side of things, the pandemic and lockdown happening towards the beginning of this year, what we've noticed is that those organizations that, just based on what you just said there about the trust and walking the talk. They were the organizations, the teams that were able to adapt quicker.
Yes.
Those who didn't adapted, but they found it a lot harder because they didn't have that trust, that foundation side of things, right? Which was really important.
Right. Absolutely. And communication is key. People feel more trust when they feel like they're being informed and
Right.
guided. So that
Yeah.
it does absolutely. There's so many little ways to build trust, and there's so many little ways to lose trust. But the companies that are enforcing those things, they're communicating, they're walking their talk, they're asking their people, they're getting their input, and they're taking action on it. Or at the very least, explaining to them, we're not doing this right now. Here's why. Let's talk about this or reshape it. When they have those open conversations with their people and their people know what's going on, there's trust.
Yeah. Let's go back to something you said before, which is around the transparency side of things and the empathy, the open side of things. I think it's really important. So there's a couple of things I actually want to go back to. One is around personal development. So we'll go back to that. But the second one is around the transparency. Let's go to the personal development. How important is it for a leader or a person? Forget it whether they're a leader, an individual. What is it important for them to be doing this personal development, and what should they be doing?
Oh, so good. Personal development required, right? Because you have to have self-awareness, right? You need to know where you need to develop yourself. And there's so many ways you can do this. It's almost like you can pick your interests and follow them, right? Or think about what's coming up in conversations. What do my people need from me? What skills do I need to develop? And you can do this through books, documentaries, there's online programs, there's trainings you can sign up for, there's coaching, but it's not even so much important other than having I think required is self-awareness in terms of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and the impact you have on other people. That is minimum. And anything you can do to develop that awareness and those skills, fantastic. When you branch out from there, it really could be almost anything because it depends on what your interests are, what sector you're in, what type of business you have, the business model, how big is your team. But if you're following your interests and you're paying attention to what you're being asked, you'll know what to seek out and how to develop. It's almost like a natural next step. Every new learning leads you to the next thing. And there's so many resources out there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, great. And I think the other thing too is a lot of people go into large organizations or any kind of business and they're expecting their business, their company to develop them. They go, okay, so what's the company going to do for me? I've never had that attitude. I've always had the attitude of I've got to look after myself and be the best myself. And so I would actually go and invest money on myself rather than waiting for, if the company did it, great. But I never waited for that. Have you been like that or what have you done?
Yeah, it's been a mix of both. There's even been some trainings that the company had suggested where I thought, ooh, that is not where I want to be going. That's not what and that actually came around as I was discovering coaching. I had a leader in my organization who said, I'd like you to get certified as a black belt, which is like a process improvement training. And I was like, ooh, process improvement is not really where I want to focus because by that point, as you're well aware, I was more interested in developing people, honing leaders, mentoring. How do we get training for leaders? How do we give them experiences as leaders so they can test it out and see what I was at that point more interested in developing a program where we could give people a taste of what it's like to be a people leader before they become a people leader, because you brushed on this earlier. Sometimes people are chosen just because they're really good at the task or the area. They have a lot of knowledge in the area and it's, oh, the position's open. You're the most senior person here. You've been doing this the longest, or you're the strongest person on this team. You be the team lead. And then some of them will do well. And some people get in that position and they don't know how to lead people.
Sure.
They know how to do the work really well. And so I was more interested in how do we give people a taste of that so they know whether or not this is something that interests them. And perhaps if they're not a people leader, we can find them another path of leadership that they can feel good about, because especially in the US culture, like if you're not getting promoted, then you feel like a failure, or you feel like there aren't opportunities to get raises. So we're promoting people at the expense of all the other people who will then report to them. So I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's just an example of how there's so many different things you can hone yourself and get and gain skills on. And yes, to answer your question, I was reading personal development books, and it did show in the workplace that it's part of what had me stand out. And I think my psychology background and my interest in how people work was a huge reason as to why I got those 5 promotions when I got them, because I'd already had a basis in psychology and human development. And I just kept adding to what I knew. And then as I was experiencing things at work, I would look up articles and maybe some trainings on how do you deal with this situation and what does this happen? So it's really, to sum it all up, follow your interests.
Very good. Yeah. And when you and I are young people, we're young. And the thing here is that even going back 20 years ago, we'd read the books and so forth. If I go back 30 years ago, it was the cassette tapes, the books and things like that. The books has always been there. Nowadays, a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm too busy. I'm a leader. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, I'm a manager. I'm just too busy for that stuff. I'm like, what? And today there is, going back to about the articles and so forth, you've got those available, but now you've got things like executive book summaries. They take 300 pages, they summarize it in 8 pages, easy. You've got the Audible side of things. You've got audios, you've got audiobooks.
My
you've got
savior. Yep. Audible.
Podcasts and things like that. So that's great. And now you've also got things like YouTube, and you can go on there and you can search the topics like you were just saying before, and you can go and watch somebody on a video, give you some information about it, show you how to do it, which is quite interesting to see. I want to go. Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, yes, it makes no sense for somebody to say, I'm too busy to get better at what I'm doing.
Yeah, very easy to say, isn't it? Yeah. Hey, I want to go to the second area that I wanted to ask you, because that one was around the personal development. The second one was around transparency. We're finding that, as you said before, that leaders are expected to be more transparent nowadays. Why aren't they transparent? What's holding them back? Any ideas?
Yeah, definitely. There is this perception that a leader is somebody who has it all together, right? They're always doing the right thing. They know the way, show the way, go the way, right? And if they're making mistakes or they don't know, then they feel like, oh, I shouldn't be a leader. But that's not true. That's an old myth about leaders, was that leaders had to just do everything perfectly. They had to be the person who knew the most in the room. And that is not true at all. As a leader, you don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. You have to be able to create that space that would allow the most knowledgeable person in the room to feel comfortable to bring their thoughts forward, or to encourage other people to bring their perspectives forward and how to gain information. And I have had clients who have said, when it came up that they needed help, they were drowning in the amount of work they needed to do and deliverables and all of that. And I was like, who can you ask for help? Or can you have a conversation with your boss and set priorities and find out what needs to get done so you can reorganize this? Because yes, this is more than is humanly possible for any one person to do. And the response, I'll never forget this one response, but I've heard it on several occasions. I can't do that, because if I do that, I'll be saying I'm not competent. I am not capable. You chose the wrong person for this job. So instead of being transparent and getting a little vulnerable and saying, I need help, they were more willing to sacrifice their health, their families, their personal life, to work these extremely long hours so they could keep up appearances that they had it all together.
Yep. I'm glad I asked you that question, because I think you're right. That's exactly where a lot of people are at, and they don't want to be transparent because it's almost like they have a mask that they're hiding behind that mask. I'm not talking about a pandemic mask. I'm talking about this mask called leadership at times, and some people hide behind it, and it's really quite sad to see it happen.
Yes, when it doesn't need to. We've shared, like, you can come forward and people will respect that.
It's the strength.
I'll share this really quick, Dennis, because I was that person at times in my job. And when I was getting close to the next promotion, I would have people say, I want your job, but I don't want to do what you were doing.
Yeah.
Because they saw it. They
Yeah.
saw the long hours. And I was like, I don't expect that you do what I do. Part of me is at that point in my life, I was a workaholic and I derived extreme pleasure and also some ego boost as well
Right.
to really over delivering all of the time. And I would just say, I don't expect you to do what I did. I expect you to deliver and know when that means you need to work a little bit extra and when you can back off a little bit. But it let me know that as a leader, I was scaring people
Yeah.
away from ever wanting to be to my successor.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's scary for a lot of people. But yeah, you're right. Good. So thanks for sharing and being vulnerable with us there. So it's cool. Bengu, you and I met a few years ago, and I had the pleasure of facilitating some events around the top talent within Hewlett Packard, and you were one of the attendees of some of those programs, which was fantastic to see. And but the question I've got for you here is, how did you get into leadership?
I think it was a interesting story because at times people aspire for leadership, but leadership found me in a way because I was curious, I was passionate, I was always trying to help others to make an impact. And I became the natural leader in customer relations in a way because at that time I was based in Dubai and I was mentoring Israel and different countries and Turkey at that time. And our projects got successful because we were fully accountable with the results. And it was an organic progression for me. And also, we worked with the different teams, building on relationship, improving on results, and finding where we could do more of, not being intimidated by each other's success, but rather on the bright spots. What can I learn from whom? Who has the best result on what area? Who has the best skill that could benefit for the bigger picture? So we became better as a team and being proud of what we are doing, not taking ourselves so seriously.
Fantastic. Meaning, so we weren't, and I like that. We weren't intimidated by each other, but we looked at the bright spots and we learned from each other, which is great. And you used the word being accountable. How important is it for leaders today to be accountable?
I think it means everything, every step of the way, and your actions count more than your words. And everyone is looking up to you to play the role model every day, whether it is your child, whether it's your stakeholders. Everybody is watching you and making a judgment out of your actions. Also, maybe it's true to say people are inspired more from the positives, but also ready to spot the negatives and behaviors, which is not ideal, but you may be talking otherwise. So I promise to myself, I will be accountable for my actions. I will be accountable to others, and I'd like to be the change every time I want to see in the world, beginning with myself.
Oh, fantastic. So the change in the world, for any kind of change to happen, I would like to see that start with me. And I think that's a beautiful way to think about things there, Bengu. So well done in saying that.
Thank you very much, Dennis, because that's what I truly believe. It's easy to get drowned into office politics or criticism, but the best way is also to stay on the positive, focus on the good things that could initiate a change and show with your actions positive results and positive environment and trusted relationship is possible in even in today's ever-changing world.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, right? By showing your actions, by being the change, being positive in that, that starts to build trust, which you just said, which is really important. So, Ben, here's a question for you. And the question is, the person can be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
I think I have a couple of favorite leaders. Of course, being from Turkey, Atatürk is everybody's leader because he has achieved a revolutionary result at a very difficult time for the country. And he transformed and have driven the change in a new era of modernization, including civil and political equality for minorities and women. Also, from recent time, I find creative founders of Pfizer BioNTech vaccines, creators Uğur Şahin and Özlem Türeci, because they are extremely valuable for the world, not only for the impact they make for the world, humanity, but also they are a great test word to science and technology, startup and immigration, and also trusting yourself no matter what. Also, for a different reason, Greta Thunberg, she's such a young, passionate, straight talker person, and she is also a great example. You're never too small to make a change, and you're never too small to make an impact. Of course, Nelson Mandela, peace, justice, freedom, what he brought to multiracial democracy is a great example when we are talking about Black Lives Matter.
I think you're never too small to make a change or impact. I think that's wonderful. I like also what you said there about trust yourself no matter what. Now, if I go back to what you said around never too small to make a change or impact, people say to me, it's big things that have to make a change or impact. And I go, no. And they go, what do you mean? I went, you think about it at nighttime. If there is a mosquito in your room, does that make an impact? Does that make a change in your room? Does it bother you? And
Totally.
people go like, oh, yeah, no, exactly, totally. But it's only a small little thing, right? But that mosquito has so much impact. So you're right. Never too small to make a change or impact.
Well, maybe it's nice to explain how I changed from being a lawyer into somebody who explores engagement and happiness at the workplace, because a lot of people find it quite strange that a lawyer gets into engagement and happiness. But the point is, when you work in labor law and social security, you're always, as we call it, at the back end. When something goes wrong, then I would step in. If somebody got fired, it was my role to do something. If someone gets ill, I need to work on that. And then I found out, first of all, it's tiring because, like you said in the introduction, we're running around and we haven't got any clue what we're doing with our lives until you think, maybe I can do it in a better way. And I looked at all those thousands of files that I went through, and I saw that we were always too late with a reaction. So I wanted to be a train and talk with people and explore what happiness and engagement can do to you as a leader, as a team, as a company, as a normal human being. Because we are in a role, but we're all just bloody human beings.
Yep. So rather being an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, I'd rather be at the top of the cliff and actually helping people and getting engagement and people being happy in what we're doing for sure. Hey, Paul, how did you get into leadership?
I think 90% of the people, you step into a position and then you are asked, hey, would you like to become the next leader? And you are manager and you know how it goes. And then suddenly you find out that you get to that position that you think, is this still fun for me? And fun is one of my core values. And I say fun is my fundament. If I'm doing something I don't like, I will stop because it costs so much energy that I'm losing myself. So being a manager for many years, then creating my own consultancy firm with 25 people, I would come home at the end of the day and tell my wife, I've been so busy, but I've done nothing. And then I thought, this is going to be the end. So I stopped. I'm a solopreneur. I work with a team of highly educated people, but we're all on our own.
Yeah, so I think that for listeners here, I think that's really important. What Paul's saying is the fact that if you're not happy doing something, or you feel like you're doing something, it's just whereby you're treading water, but you're not actually going very far or making any progress, take time out to stop, think about things. Is this really in question? Is this really the right thing that I'm doing? And do I really need to go off and to do something else as well? So I think that's brilliant. Just that's bang on straight away. Paul's already shared some great insights already.
Yeah, but hey, this is the point. And look, I'm 62 years old, but I know people of 28 years old who have that same feeling. And I think that the youngest generation, the Generation Z and the alphas that are coming onto the labor market will have this as their first and clear focus. We need to be human beings first and then enjoy our job. So for us, boomers, Xers, Yers, we need to be careful that we don't overrun ourselves. And look, this moment in the Netherlands, out of 17 million people, almost 6 million are close to burnout. Isn't that silly?
That's huge.
That's huge. And that's partly because of Corona. We had already 15% of the workplace. They don't really have burnout, but they're on the way into it.
And do they actually understand it? Do they actually know that they're on that journey towards the burnout?
No, and you know how it goes. You're engaged, you're working hard, and then you become a workaholic without knowing because you can't say no anymore. So what we see is the soon as I get in a company, I start talking to leaders and managers, and I make a difference between leaders and managers. But that's obvious. And then I see someone like, oh yeah, Paul, no problem. Oh yeah, I can do that for you. Oh, and I said, stop. Say no. Please say no to me. Because if I can train you to say no to me, you can say no to others. Those workaholics keep on going. Then they get back from their work, 10 hours work. They have a family. They need to squash, to tennis, to play soccer, to do whatever, and have their friends and the family. And it goes on the whole bloody week and the whole weekend. Then you get tired. Even talking like this makes me tired. But hey, look around us. What I mean, I was in Auckland. I saw the same as I see in Amsterdam. It is the same. And we were talking to Dutch people over there who were working in Auckland, and they said exactly the same. We left the Netherlands because it's so busy. Now we live in Auckland. It looks like the Netherlands. And then I told them we have Old Zealand and you have New Zealand. Lands. That's the point.
Yeah.
There are people everywhere in the world. So that your podcast is so successful means that everybody in the world is in the same treadmill.
Yep.
And
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And you know what? I'm finding that as I talk to leaders and I'm doing events around the place and that, there's one thing that I'm definitely talking to them, and that is, even especially with the lockdown, it's been emphasized even more, the transition between the bedroom and or they're in the bedroom still because their office is in the bedroom, or into another office in the house or in the kitchen lounge. They're finding it very hard and they don't know when to stop, and they just keep working. As you said about the workaholic, they don't realize it, and they get to 2:00 and they realize they haven't even had lunch yet, or at 12, or they get to, oh, you know what? I'll do one more email, one more meeting. And next minute they look up and it's 7 p.m. They still haven't had lunch. And as you said, Paul, they're a day in and day out like this. And it's always what I call, they're always on. They're always out there doing things, which is really just really interesting to see. So yeah, they need to be careful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.